Bombshell allegations against the man who preceded him.
What he was able to do yesterday was turn this narrative around to pretty much put the Obama administration, the former administration, on the defense.
But now you have Corey Lewandowski doubling, tripling down and saying maybe there's a wiretap of a U.S. senator.
They did spend time listening to conversations between then Senator Jeff Sessions and the ambassador to Russia. What other conversations did they listen in on?
Spokesman for the former president saying the Obama White House never ordered surveillance, they say, on any U.S. citizens.
I've heard from inside the administration there may be people going to jail.
For what? For leaks? Leaking classified information, or?
To start with, for sure.
That's why knocking Sessions out of the game was such a victory for the swamp.
Supporters of President Trump holding rallies across the country today.
Hi, Seb. Good morning. But we do want to get right to really the breaking news we just heard from the White House. We want to bring in Kristen Fisher, who is at Mar-a-Lago. Kristen, what are you hearing? What is Sean Spicer saying about this?
Hey, Abby, big news. For the very first time since President Trump first tweeted and first made these accusations against former President Barack Obama that he had allegedly wiretapped his campaign headquarters, Trump Tower, during the election. For the very first time since he made those accusations, we are finally getting a response from the White House, and it is from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. He posted it on Twitter just about 10 minutes ago, and here they are. It's a series of 4 tweets, and the first one is reports concerning potentially politically motivated investigations immediately ahead of the 2016 election are very troubling. President Trump is requesting that as part of their investigation into Russian activity, the Congressional Intelligence Committees exercise their oversight authority to determine whether executive branch investigative powers were abused in 2016. Neither the White House nor the president will comment further until such oversight is conducted. So this is coming out just minutes before the White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders is expected to be speaking on another Sunday show. And given that statement that the White House nor the president will comment further until this investigation is conducted, we likely won't be getting any more information from her or the White House today. And so President Trump's critics are going to come out and say, hey, you make a claim like this, that your predecessor potentially broke the law by ordering the wiretapping of your campaign headquarters. They're going to say, if you put out a claim that big, a claim that bold, that you're going to need to offer some hard proof and some hard evidence to back it up. But the White House is going to stand by its claim, it appears, that these allegations took place and that they took place right before the election. So this is now the White House really handing the ball over to these congressional intelligence committees, and we'll see what they say. But this is our first official response from the White House, and it comes just a little over 24 hours after that very first tweet that set this all off. Abby,
thank you, Kristen. The plot thickens.
That's right. The first
continues to thicken.
The first lesson is if you want to stay on top of the news, just watch Fox and Friends Weekend, because that's going to break.
But this is big, though. I mean, this is in their response. The White House are saying we're calling for an investigation into the executive government.
The investigation.
But what they're really trying to say, Ed, it seems like, is we want to get to the bottom of what former President Obama knew and how involved was he in all of this.
Right. 2 quick reactions, which is that the White House is basically saying this investigation of Russian hacking and whatnot should not just be about what did Trump campaign advisors know and what did they say and what contact did they have, but it should also include potential executive branch abuse of power by the Obama administration in 2016. So it's a gambit here that's risky in some ways, because if this investigation widens, it's just more time spent on all of this, but they're gambling that they can shift the focus away from the Trump administration to the Obama administration, number one. But number two, did you notice it said that the congressional committees should investigate whether executive power was abused by the Obama administration? Donald Trump didn't say whether it was abused yesterday.
He said
it was. He said the wiretapping was done, that it was McCarthyism, and that it was Watergate.
It's obviously a very carefully written statement that's different from charges that were made on Saturday morning. But it is a widening of the net. It means the Obama administration's executive actions will be investigated. And I think from their perspective, they're saying we want an independent, we want a congressional review, as opposed to just presenting our own evidence, which may keep the story going no matter what. The question is how long it goes, how long that investigation takes, and can you not comment over the course of that entire investigation if there are more leaks and there's more stuff that comes on?
We had David Bossie, a key Trump advisor, last hour live on the show saying they got to get this behind them. This is not a Democrat saying it. He's saying get it behind you, Focus on immigration, jobs, all of that.
Well, I think that's where they're the strongest administration, is when they are focusing on following through on all the promises they made throughout the campaign. You mentioned that tax reform, infrastructure, health care, immigration, list goes on and on. That is, I know, what they're working on behind the scenes. The problem is what the media is all focused on, what they're talking about, ends up being much of a distraction from what the American people really want to hear right now.
That's exactly right. They're battling the media, who Steve Bannon calls the opposition party, every single day. We're going to have a member, a different part of the media, on later on today. Mark Levin, who's a famed radio talk show host, also a former chief of staff to an attorney general, I will clarify, and a constitutional lawyer. A lot of people are crediting him Thursday on his radio program for sort of laying out the case as to why there may have been executive overreach from the Obama administration against President Trump. But you wouldn't know that he was a constitutional lawyer or a former chief of staff to an attorney general if you listen to ABC World News and the mainstream media, because this is how they frame anyone who happens to challenge former President Obama.
Because the president cited no proof, it is not clear tonight whether he based his allegations on a top-secret White House briefing or whether it came from reading an article on the conservative Breitbart website posted Friday that detailed speculation from a conspiracy-loving talk show host, Mark Levin.
Think about that. That's how they frame it. Listen, I listen to this guy's radio program almost every single day. He's as thoughtful as they come, a constitutional scholar, former attorney chief of staff, as I said. He knows what he's talking about. He doesn't throw stuff out there, yet the media says a conspiratorial-loving talk show host. This is what you're up against. No, this is the left-stream opposition party media. They're not unbiased. They're totally in the tank against Trump. And you got to point it out before you just take what they say as fact.
He's going to come very passionate this morning. It's an exclusive interview.
It's an exclusive interview coming up later this hour. We're going to allow Mark Levin to lay out the case. Hey, you've made the case. Where'd you get information? What are the facts?
That'll be very interesting. Meanwhile, though, former President Obama, he gave this statement out yesterday after all of this broke here on our show this morning. This is what he wrote. He said, a cardinal rule of the Obama administration was that no White House official ever interfered with any independent investigation led by the Department of Justice. As part of that practice, neither President Obama nor any White House official ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen. Any suggestion otherwise is simply false.
Right. So they picked up on one point and they sort of parsed it and said President Obama did not order it. That statement did not say
doesn't mean it wasn't wiretapped.
Right. Someone else ordered it, apparently. And it reminded me of the story from 2015. In the Wall Street Journal, exploded out there, and a lot of people have forgotten about it. December 29th, 2015, about Israel being spied on and members of Congress spied on, by the way, by the Obama administration, members of Congress getting dragged into the net. They said, quote, behind the scenes, the White House decided to keep certain allies under close watch. Topping the list, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. White House officials believed intercepted information could be valuable to counter Mr. Netanyahu's campaign. This was on Iran, of course. They also recognized that asking for it was politically risky. So wary of a paper trail stemming from a request, the White House let the NSA decide what to share and what to withhold. Quote, we didn't say do it, a senior U.S. official said. We didn't say don't do it.
Which is exactly what's happening today. It actually sounds like the exact same thing.
We didn't want a paper trail.
You see stuff like
to the White House, a paper trail to the White House.
To the White House, because they want plausible deniability. And when
then their statement yesterday is, it wasn't ordered by the White House, right? Because you don't want paper trails.
John Favreau had 2 tweets that were similar to that. Listen, the amount of caveats in those non-denial denials, you could drive, as I say, a Mack truck through.
And you said not an F-150?
Not an F-150, a Mack truck or a Humvee that's so full of holes.
Humvee.
A terrible...
And that's big.
Yeah, it's not a denial. It's evidence that there's something there. The question is, through this investigation, which we now learned, we're gonna get to the bottom of.
Well, we had Ed Klein on the couch earlier this morning, and we asked him about his thoughts, and he said that he would be shocked if former President Obama didn't know about this. If this ended up happening and there was a wiretap that took place, that is at a level that is so high, right, that it is likely, maybe he wasn't behind it, but he certainly would have known that something was going on.
Another key part of the Trump White House statement a couple of moments ago that's just breaking this hour, which is the very last line, which was, while this is being investigated, the White House will have no further comment.
Yeah.
That's what the White House communications team is saying. Will President Trump follow through on that? Will he not tweet about this anymore? Are they now saying, hey, let's knock this off?
Yeah, well, when the failing New York Times puts out another unfair headline and uses anonymous sources, it's going to be pretty hard not to comment. So we'll see how this unfolds. But the story moves forward with the news now that
I have a feeling he's wanting to comment right now.
Maybe.
But they're saying, hold off for a little bit, hang tight, let's just let this play out.
David Bossie, his senior advisor, was telling us last hour that this is something that's eating at them. And he was saying, look, remember what President Trump said right here on Fox and Friends at the beginning of this week, where it all started before his big speech to a joint session of Congress. The president said A for effort, but a C plus for communications and getting his message out. And there's frustration among some of his own people that they've been playing too much defense. It might be time to plus up the team. Yeah, we heard that, of course. All right, more on this, and we'll keep tracking, of course, the president's Twitter feed as well. All right, coming up, an exclusive interview with radio talk show host Mark Levin, breaking down the president's wiretapping claims. Plus, our own James Rosen, who knows what it's like to be wiretapped, live straight. Fox News alert breaking this hour. President Trump demanding an investigation into potential wiretapping on his campaign and on Trump Tower by the Obama administration. That is his allegation. Reports concerning potentially politically motivated investigations ahead of the 2016 election are very troubling, they say. President Trump is requesting that as part of their investigation into Russian activity, the Congressional Intelligence Committees exercise their oversight authority to determine whether executive branch investigative powers were abused in 2016. Neither by the White House or the president will comment further until such oversight is conducted. That coming in from Sean Spicer. Here to weigh in, someone who is in the trenches for all of this kind of stuff, former State Department spokesperson under the Obama administration, Fox News contributor Marie Harf. Good morning, Marie. Pretty dramatic 24 hours, as you can imagine. You've been in the bunker for stories like this before. First of all, what do you make of what the White House is trying to spin this morning?
Well, there is, to be very clear, zero evidence to back up what President Trump tweeted yesterday morning. And so I don't blame them for trying to take a series of very bizarre, very disturbing tweets and spin them into something that they can do something with in the news cycle. Because look, as we've talked about, he had a good week earlier in the week in the speech. He was moving forward on some of his other policy priorities. And then we've spent the last 24 hours dissecting bizarre tweets from the president that have no basis in fact that anyone has been able to provide so far.
Okay, so that's your view that what he tweeted was bizarre, but then help me make sense then of what former President Obama, who you work for, what his office said yesterday, quote, a cardinal rule of the Obama administration was that no White House official ever interfered with any independent investigation led by the Department of Justice. As part of that practice, neither President Obama nor any White House official ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen. Any suggestion otherwise is simply false. We're going to give James Rosen from Fox a chance to respond to that since he faced some surveillance during the Obama administration. But please parse for us the fact that they're saying the president didn't order that. However, Marie, you know that means that someone else in the administration may have ordered surveillance of Donald Trump.
Well, they were responding, I think, directly to President Trump's accusations that Barack Obama did this. And that's a really serious accusation, and they were right to respond to that. There are two ways that American citizens can get caught up in wiretaps that are involved in national security investigations. One is if they get caught talking to a foreign official who's being surveilled. I think most of us assume that's how Mike Flynn got caught talking to the Russians. But the other is if law enforcement, the FBI, or other law enforcement agencies go to a court called the FISA court and get a warrant specifically to tap that individual. That is a process that the Obama administration was making very clear in that statement yesterday would not have been directed by President Obama or the White House.
Not directed by President Obama, pardon me, but they were essentially confirming that there was surveillance.
I don't think I would read this statement that way, and we really need to be careful before we get out in front of the facts here.
Well,
and
John Favreau, though, who was one of your colleagues in the Obama administration, said the contrary. He said they were not saying surveillance didn't happen.
Well, I wouldn't assume that they were saying it did, though.
Well, but aren't we playing games then, word games here? What happened?
We are, and look, what this underscores is we need a broad, independent investigation to see all of the facts about what happened in the 2016 election, the Russian meddling, who knew what, who was talking to who. And sure, look, I'm happy for them to take a look at how the Obama administration responded to this. But every day that President Trump draws attention to the story of Russian meddling and their contacts with Russia. He's taking away from tax reform, from health care, from all of the other things he wants to focus on, and that is not a good day for his administration.
But Eureka, Maria Harf, is now saying as a Democrat that yes, potential, and I underline potential, executive branch abuse by the Obama administration should be part of this investigation.
That's not what I said. I am saying that I am happy for anyone to look at the record that we had in the Obama administration. I wasn't directly involved in this issue, of course. I was at the State Department doing diplomatic things that were very separate.
You've done these diplomatic dances before. I understand all this diplomatic, but here, I've got something that's direct. We have this on tape. 2012, you remember it well, President Obama, not President Trump, told then President Medvedev of Russia, I get reelected, tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after that reelection. To what? To do deals. So didn't the Obama administration that you served under, you wanted to work more closely with the Russians? That wasn't a scandal.
We did. And Ed, you know, I remember the outcry from Republicans across the board when President Obama said that. And I would love to hear some of that outcry from those same Republicans today when Donald Trump compares us to Russia in human rights, when he refuses to criticize Russia on anything it's doing, when he is much cozier to Russia than we ever were in the Obama administration. So I think we need some consistency here. And again, every day that we are investigating this issue, which I believe we should. Donald Trump raised more questions yesterday. I think they're ridiculous. I think what he said was irresponsible. But let's investigate the Russia connections. I would love for us to. And I think Donald Trump will regret drawing more attention to this and taking attention away from the political agenda that he has and his supporters want him to follow through on.
Marie Harf, we appreciate your insights this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Of course.
Still ahead, our exclusive with Mark Levin. The other side, he'll break down President Trump's wiretapping claims and what he knows coming up. Remember, he kicked a lot of this off last week. We have an exclusive with him coming up. And our James Rosen knows what it's like to be wiretapped. I mentioned that. And investigated by the Obama administration. He joins us live to weigh in on the president's accusations.
Time for a quick check of your headlines. President Trump expected to sign a new order restricting travel from 7 countries. It could come as early as tomorrow. The president's original order has been held up in federal court since it was signed in late January. The executive action is aimed at preventing radical Islamic terrorists from reaching our soil. And people across the nation showing their support for our commander-in-chief. March for Trump rallies were held in more than 40 states. But counter-protesters, some violent, also showed up as well. Things getting ugly in Berkeley, California. Fists flying between President Trump supporters and opponents. Police arresting nearly a dozen people. The brawls leaving 7 people hurt. Wow.
All right, well, Fox News alert now. President Trump accusing the Obama administration of wiretapping his team. And our next guest knows all too well what that is like.
That's right. In 2013, the previous Attorney General, Eric Holder, signed off on an order to tap the personal phones and emails of one of our own, naming him a, quote, possible co-conspirator under the Espionage Act.
That man is James Rosen. He's a Fox News correspondent and author of a great new book, A Torch Kept Lit, and he joins us now from Washington. James, thanks for joining us. Just we said a little bit of it, but for our viewers, if you would, just briefly remind them of kind of what you went through in 2013.
Well, good to be with you, Pete, Abby, and Ed. And they teach us in TV school never to contradict the anchor unless it's absolutely necessary. And here I guess it is, because I have to clarify that I was not wiretapped. My parents were not wiretapped, which is where you place a listening device on someone's telephone line and you listen to their conversations. What happened to me was that the Attorney General, Eric Holder, under Barack Obama as president, secretly designated me a criminal co-conspirator and a flight risk. And thereby had a federal judge give the government permission to rifle through all my Gmails. They could read the emails, and then also to get all the phone records associated with about 20 phones that I used at that time in my reporting. All of those phone lines were 202 or 703, which are the area codes associated with Washington and the Pentagon, Northern Virginia area. One of those 20 phone lines was 718. And that referred to my parents' house on Staten Island at that time.
Wow. And James, to remind people, what were they looking for? What were they trying to investigate here?
The Obama administration had launched an investigation to determine my sourcing for a series of reports I did on that time from the State Department about North Korea's nuclear weapons program. After all of this was disclosed by the Washington Post 4 years after that designation was applied to me, and that's how I learned about it, along with the rest of the world, President Obama, in a speech at National Defense University on counterterrorism, pronounced himself troubled by the idea that a working journalist would be criminalized for doing his job, and demanded that the person who was responsible for this, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, should get to the bottom of what happened and provide some reforms at the Department of Justice, which were, in turn, enacted.
Well, James, to bring it to this story and why we had you on today, obviously with the current president's tweets yesterday, alleging that President Obama was behind wiretapping him, wiretapping Trump Tower. Separate case, but related in the sense that the reaction from the Obama camp yesterday, as you saw, was President Obama never ordered surveillance of any American citizen. Thin line there, which is he didn't personally order it, but clearly in your case, someone in his administration ordered surveillance of you, a U.S. citizen. Period.
That's right. The surveillance extended, for example, to monitoring my whereabouts and my use of the swipe badge that I had as a member of the State Department press corps when I was leaving the building, where I was using telephones and so forth. And that was attributed to Eric Holder, who later told the Washington Post that it was the greatest regret of his tenure. And that, by all accounts, this was illegal and unprecedented. Not even Neil Sheehan, who was the New York Times reporter back in 1971 who published the Pentagon Papers, 7,000 classified documents, was designated by the Nixon administration as a criminal co-conspirator in a violation of the Espionage Act. So that was an honor that I had all unto myself. But in the case of what we're hearing now from President Trump, there's just a lot we don't know. We have to caution our viewers that we hope to learn more about it. But if it's true that the Obama administration went to the FISA court to get some kind of surveillance at Trump Tower, whether it was of a computer tower or whether it was of the president's telephone, as he seems to believe when he uses terms like wiretapping, we would like to know what basis of probable cause would have been asserted in order to secure that permission for that surveillance.
Does your own experience lead you to believe that something like this is possible? There's some dismissing it offhand, saying it would never happen. Is your experience that, in light of how you've seen the federal government work and the way people in power can use it, that it's possible that something like President Trump is alleging could have happened?
It's entirely plausible. This is the nature of the age in which we live, the age of Eric Snowden. But again, it remains unproved at this point. And believe me, we've now just heard from the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, in a tweet storm of his own, saying that it is the view of the Trump White House that any committees that are investigating allegations of Russian contacts and Russian meddling in the election should also be investigating this allegation about President Obama wiretapping President Trump. And then this was the most remarkable of Sean's tweets. He said, the White House, neither the White House nor the president will comment further until such oversight is provided. That's probably the one thing Sean Spicer has ever said in his life that he's least sure will turn out to be true. that the president won't comment.
James, I think your perspective and your voice this morning is exactly what the American people need to hear. Someone who has personally experienced being investigated by the government to say, everyone take a step back. Anything is possible in this situation. We just have to wait and see how everything unfolds. Really important voice to have this morning, James. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.
And always in the James Rosen good humor.
Yeah.
Indeed. Absolutely. All right. Up next, our exclusive interview with radio talk show host and constitutional scholar Mark Levin. He says former President Obama used police state tactics to undermine the Trump administration. Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Joining us now live from Levin TV studio is the former Chief of Staff to Attorney General Edwin Meese, a constitutional lawyer and radio talk show host, the great one, Mark Levin, from his hidden bunker. Mark, thank you very much for joining us this morning. On your Thursday evening radio broadcast, you laid out a devastating case about executive overreach of the Obama administration, which many believe metamorphosized itself to tweets that President Trump sent out on Saturday morning accusing potential wiretapping in Trump Tower. We want to give you a case here this morning to lay out what you know about it, and the evidence you have for the potential executive overreach of the Obama administration.
Well, pleasure to be here. The evidence is overwhelming. This is not about President Trump's tweeting. This is about the Obama administration's spying. And the question isn't whether it's spied. We know they went to the FISA court twice. The question is, who did they spy on? The extent of the spying. That is, the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, Trump surrogates. And I want to walk you through this, the American people. Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. This is all public. Head Street. 2 separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community have confirmed that the FBI sought and was granted a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. This is spying. In October, giving counterintelligence permission to examine the activity of, quote, U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia. Let me go on. This isn't me. They say the first FISA request, sources say, named Trump, was denied back in June, denied by the court. But the second was drawn more narrowly and was granted in October after evidence was presented of a server possibly related to the Trump campaign and its alleged links to 2 banks. Now, sources suggest that a FISA warrant was granted to look at the full content of emails and other related documents that may concern U.S. persons. Now, I know people are hung up with Trump's word wiretapping. Well, how'd they get access to this server information? Does it really matter if it was wiretapping, electronic surveillance, or whatever it was? Exhibit 2, The Guardian, a well-known right-wing British paper. Here it is. Quote, The Guardian has learned the FBI applied for a warrant from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court over the summer in order to monitor 4 members of the Trump team suspected of irregular contacts with Russian officials. Keep in mind, this is during a presidential election. The sitting president, the incumbent party, is now investigating the presidential candidate of the Republican Party and his campaign to some extent. The FISA court turned down the application asking FBI counterintelligence investigators to narrow its focus. According to one report, the FBI was finally granted a warrant in October. Exhibit 3, McClatchy, another well-known right-wing newspaper. Here they have the agencies. Headline, FBI, 5 other agencies, 5 other Obama administration agencies probe possible covert Kremlin aid to Trump. The FBI and 5 other law enforcement intelligence agencies have collaborated for months in an investigation into Russian attempts to influence the November election, including whether money from Kremlin covertly aided presidential-elect Donald Trump. 2 people familiar with the matter said the agencies involved in the inquiry are the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and representatives of the Director of the National Intelligence. Are you telling me Barack Obama didn't know what was going on in 6 agencies?
As you
hold
go
on, hold on,
how are
hold
you?
on.
Okay, keep going.
I'm not done. I need to make the case because the media seems to be confused about their own reporting. New York Times, another well-known liberal outlet, intercepted Russian communications, part of inquiry into Trump associates, January 19. The FBI is leading the investigations, aided by the NSA, the CIA, Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The investigators have accelerated their efforts in recent weeks, but have found no conclusive evidence of wrongdoing. Listen to this. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. This is the New York Times,
another right-wing outlet.
4.
Another right-wing outlet,
Let's continue. New York Times again. NSA gets more latitude to share intercepted communications. In the final days of the Obama administration, the administration has expanded the power of the NSA to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. Now, why would they do this on the way out the door? Well, March 1, Exhibit 6. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. In the Obama administration's last days, listen to this, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Trump and Russians across the government. I'm not done. Exhibit 7, New York Times. Flynn is said to have talked to Russians about sanctions Trump took office. Well, where'd they get this information? Well, Mark, you know, the FISA court, they're always monitoring the Russian ambassador. And so how do we know that? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But there's an awful lot of other activity. Sure. Here we have Washington Post. One more. Washington Post, March 2nd. U.S. investigators have examined contacts Attorney General Sessions had with Russian officials during the time he was advising Donald Trump's campaign. The focus of the U.S. counterintelligence investigation has been on communication between Trump campaign officials in Russia. Listen to this. The inquiry involving Sessions is examining his contacts while serving as Trump's foreign policy advisor in the spring and summer of 2016. This has been going on for a year.
Well, Mark,
now,
as you do on your radio program, you lay out a devastating case based on public documents, as you point out, and not right-wing sources, but mainstream left-stream sources. How confident are you that this investigation, which was on so-called Russian hacking, but now the White House says this morning will be broadened to looking into executive overreach, how confident are you they will find something there?
I don't know, but they already found something. The issue isn't whether the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign or transition or certain of its surrogates. The issue is the extent of it. They went into court a second time. They were so aggressive. They waited 4 or 5 months. They go back in October, weeks before the general election. They narrow their request. All of a sudden, we have leaks coming out on Flynn. Then we have a horrible meeting that took place between Sessions and so forth. And I'm telling you, as a former chief of staff to an attorney general of the United States, in the Reagan administration, these are police state tactics. Now, what did Barack Obama know? He knew everything I just read you apart from 1 or 2 articles. You know how I know? It's in the newspapers. It's right there. So Barack Obama not only knew this, but he gets a daily intelligence briefing. And let me tell you something about daily intelligence briefings. If your attorney general and your FBI is going to the FISA court to get a warrant to investigate aspects of an opposition party in the middle of a general election campaign, how much you want to bet the President of the United States knew that?
I don't want to bet you on that.
Read his opinion.
Mark, we were about to hit a hard break. Is there any way you could stick around for 1 more minute, ask you one more question on this? Welcome back to Fox and Friends. Still joining us live from Levin TV studio, former Chief of Staff to Attorney General Edwin Meese, constitutional lawyer and radio talk show host, the great one, Mark Levin. Mark, I got to tell you, even just in the break, the response has been overwhelming to the case that you laid out, which is devastating. And Abby and I were talking in the break about sort of where it goes from here, right, Abby?
Yeah, that is the question, because you laid out your case in this last block. You're very passionate about the evidence that you have. And as Pete said, we have so many people writing us in saying, thank you for speaking your voice. They're right behind you on this. My question, though, how does this play out in the media? How are they going to continue to cover this story?
Let me first say, this is the case made by the New York Times, the Washington Post, McClatchy, and the rest of them. I just put it together as a former Justice Department official. And Donald Trump here is being attacked for what he tweeted. Donald Trump is the victim. His campaign is the victim. His transition team is the victim. His surrogates are the victim. These are police state tactics. I am telling you this as a former chief of staff to an attorney general. If this had been done to Barack Obama, all hell would break loose. And it should. And Barack Obama's statement is pathetic.
Mark.
Let me just say this. Where does it go from here? They ought to release both FISA court applications where they sought the warrant. The one in the summer and the one in October. So we know exactly what they were doing. That's number one. Number two, Congress needs to see the daily presidential intelligence briefings over the past year or so. Those are the beginnings of a serious investigation. Number three, for the Republicans in Congress, you control the majority. If the Democrats do not want to assist, and they won't, because I'm starting to think Chuck Schumer and the others are participating in all this cover-up activity, then plow ahead without them. But this is important to the country. We cannot have a sitting presidential administration unleashing 6 federal agencies, intelligence and law enforcement. I don't mean the president personally sitting there and saying, you know what, Valerie, let's go get them. Obviously, the attorney general and the FBI were involved in this. This is how you get a FISA court application prepared and submitted.
Do you think former President Obama was involved in this? And if so, how much was he involved?
I'm not Nostradamus here. I just think that we ought to find out. But I will tell you this. He's more involved than he says. I mean, it's his executive branch. It's his Justice Department. Mine's been the IRS. All of a sudden, the IRS is targeting American citizens. I don't know anything about it. We have reporters, including James Rose in the AP, where the Obama administration did more investigations of reporters than any administration in American history. They're quite capable of these things. But it doesn't matter. We want to know what took place, and there ought to be public hearings on this stuff, too. I agree with the Democrats. Let's get to the bottom of this. So join me. Join us. This is the public record.
Yeah.
It's the newspaper of record, the New York Times. Let's go.
Mark, there's another aspect of this when you mentioned Chuck Schumer a moment ago. He's been trying to block as many Trump nominations as he can and slow the process. And we had J. Christian Adams, a former Justice Department official you probably know well, on a couple of hours ago. And he was pointing to something very important here, which is now that Jeff Sessions has recused himself, the person in charge here is going to be a career bureaucrat. There'll be career bureaucrats. He said the swamp won because you have people inside justice, some maybe who have been trying to undermine President Trump, who are now in charge of this investigation. And the chances of Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate confirming the nomination of the Deputy Attorney General, a Trump loyalist, now seems nil. So they have seized control of this investigation, haven't they?
They not only did that, they have squirreled their appointees into the bureaucracy, and they're buying more and more time to do that. Okay, then recess appoint a Deputy Attorney General. Do that. Say, okay, I'm recessing appointing so-and-so as Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And then, because Attorney General Sessions recused himself from matters affecting the Russian investigation and so forth, then the Deputy Attorney General who is recessed appointed is the acting Attorney General for the purposes of an investigation related to this. So Christian is right. He served as justice in the Civil Rights Division. I'm right. I served as chief of staff. I know exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what's going on. And the administration needs to respond.
Well, Mark, you laid out a devastating case. We know now why they call you the Great One. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Levin, thanks for joining Fox and Friends this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Mark.
God
Appreciate
bless.
that.
Thank you. All right.
We're going to liven things up a little bit. We're going to have some fun.
That wasn't live enough.
These grannies. No, this is going to be just active, though. These grannies have got game. They are getting national attention for their old school basketball skills. They are warming up our plaza with Adam, and it is time for all of us to go out there.